Hi everyone, Josh Knight the First here, and welcome to another episode of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid Replay, coming to you with episode 13 of the series. Let's get right into it. So first and foremost, Happy New Year, good to see you all again, welcome back to the show. So we had last week's episode off. This week we've got a brand new episode, first of the year, and we've got a lot to cover here. A lot of interesting topics, a lot of deep topics. I can't believe we're pushing the storytelling along as hard as we are in this new episode. So as we saw at the end of the last episode, the Ministry of Health has decided, yes, we're going public with the information on the Bugster virus. Everyone needs to know. This is a public health threat. You need to be aware of it. So Dr. Kyotaro holds a press conference for everyone to see, look, this is the information, this is what's going down, these are the treatment options, basically for the writers to come save you. Now everyone knows about it. Now, as I said last episode, this is going to change how the CR relates to the public completely. Now the focus is really going to be on the doctors, on the Kamen Riders. If they screw up, the whole media is going to know about it. So there's very good inclination that we're going to get a lot of detailing as far as media coverage for the writers goes later on in the series, but that's not the biggest part of this episode. But before we get into the bigger picture of this week's episode, I want to go ahead and take care of some housekeeping issues for things I didn't quite address in the last video, namely the introduction of this new character, Saiba Nico. So Saiba Nico is apparently this young girl who goes to visit Taiga at his not-quite doctor's office. She seems to be adorned with paraphernalia of games that the Genm Corporation has put out, and seems to know information about Emu, and is pushing Taiga, kind of goading him along, saying, hey, are you going to defeat him? Are you going to be better than him? Now, I'm not sure where exactly they're going with the introduction of this character. Now, granted, we're short a character with the death of Graphite, but here I'm not sure she's really going to fill in the gap as we see it now. Because when you look at it, yes, we could use another character, we could use more interaction between the people that we've already seen here in the show, but as far as what she's actually bringing to the storyline, we don't know yet. She's just kind of there, she's just kind of a fly on the wall and an annoyance, so I can't really say one way or the other how I feel about her yet, because she doesn't really have any sort of characterization yet. The only thing that we do know is that she's specifically targeting Taiga to talk to. She hasn't talked to anyone else yet. Another interesting thing I want to bring up in this episode is that we kind of have a little odd Ultraman reunion here, and I'll explain why. Several actors in this episode have been featured in other Ultraman series. Of course, we have Taiga, who was previously a member of Zeo in Ultraman X. We have the head of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Kyotaro, who was in Ultraman Ginga, and then our patient for this episode was previously a commander in Ultraman Ginga S. So yes, let's go ahead and talk about our patient this week. This one is a doozy. I didn't think they would dive in this deep after what we just dealt with last episode with the death of Kiria, but now we're really pushing the concept of death in this episode, which I'm actually very happy about. If you guys know me at all, death is a very important thing as far as the storytelling in Kamen Rider. I feel that in the last couple of years, they've kind of toned it down, especially last year with Ghost. For a series that had to deal with death, they kind of tiptoed around it very gingerly, except for when it came to the character of Grandma Fumi, but otherwise they didn't really delve into it and the weight of it. Whereas here in this episode, death plays a big part. We're actually going to see the ramifications of what happened last episode, and also how that deals into the day-to-day dealings of a doctor's life. So our patient for this week is Kazuki Shirakawa. He's a surgeon who works there at the hospital. We find that he has just contracted the Bugster virus, and he's going to go ahead and receive treatment from the CR as per usual. The thing is, he doesn't want the treatment. The interesting thing about it is that he has a very realistic reason for not wanting to be treated. So Mr. Shirakawa decides to go ahead and tell the CR, you know what, don't even worry about it. I've got Bugster virus, it doesn't matter, because on top of that, I also already have pancreatic cancer, and it's terminal. So my days are numbered as it is. I don't need treatment, I don't want treatment. I get it. I'm a surgeon, I deal with death all the time. Go ahead, it doesn't even matter to me. Now, this revelation is incredibly realistic for a show like this, and I'm surprised that they went for it, and I'm glad for it. On a personal level, I've had to deal with people that I care about very deeply, either being diagnosed or having been terminally ill with cancer. So from that aspect, I totally get it. I totally get when somebody has that diagnosis and they don't want to deal with the ramifications of it. Sometimes they don't want to seek treatment. It's incredibly mature of the show to go ahead and cover this topic in this manner. Now, the way that's going to balance out with the writers is specifically through Emu. Now, Emu has just finished his internship doing his rounds just with the pediatric ward. Now he's working on his surgical rounds. Now, if he's going to be a surgeon and more directly dealing with the surgeries, death is going to be an everyday thing for him. That just happens with doctors. You can see that on any number of other doctor shows that you see on the web or on TV as it is now. The interesting thing to see here is that since Hiro is his supervisor, he's trying to relay this message to him. And this is something that you actually see a lot in these doctor procedural shows on other networks, is that death is something you have to deal with, you're going to be hit by it, sometimes you're going to care about a patient a little too much, but then you have to kind of separate yourself from that so that you can keep doing your job as a doctor. Now granted, Hiro's not exactly the best person to receive this advice from, considering how distant he already is from everybody around him, but that doesn't mean that the advice shouldn't be listened to at all. We see this later on with the fight with the Bugster for this episode. Since Genmu has gotten Emu's focus, he's not actually doing his job in taking on the Bugster. The Bugster would directly deal with his job as a doctor, but really he's thinking more like your traditional Kamen Rider, which isn't wrong, but it means he's not doing his job as a doctor. In that sense, I really like that they're actually tackling the duality of those two things, being a hero and being a doctor, which are sometimes connected, but not always. This point is further pushed when we get to the point where Emu and Paulette have a conversation, really for the first time. The amazing part about this is that we actually see a whole nother level given to Emu's line, "I'll do this with no continues." Paulette actually relates that to his job as a doctor, that you humans have no continues. If you're in a video game, you can keep playing because you have continues, but you've only got your one life. So you're trying to save as many people as you can without having any continues. That's fascinating to me. And it's actually fascinating to me as somebody watching the show. You've actually legitimized his catchphrase as far as his occupation as a doctor is concerned. That's actually really good thinking. That's not only really good thinking, that's really good writing. I was under the impression that they were actually going to do away with most of the doctor portions of this show in favor for the more toyetic gaming aspects of it. But since they're actually trying to marry the two in this episode, they're actually doing it in a very competent way that somebody can actually grasp a hold of and be like, you know what? I get that. I totally get how you can view life in terms of a video game, because basically the way that works out, there is no reset button. Now, of course, in a game, you can't have your heroes without your antagonists, and that would bring up Kuroto-dan and Kamen Rider Genmu. Now, last episode, of course, we saw the debut of his zombie gamer form, which I didn't really go into too much detail in, but now we can really dive into it here. Now, aesthetically, I love this design. It's more than just a repaint or a rehash of the basic Rider design. It's got its own feel to it. It's very evil looking, but at the same time, it's impressive. It's not too heavy in aesthetics, too many different lines on it, but it's right where it needs to be. It's in a perfect spot for what it needs to be in juxtaposition to Eggzade's design. Now, of course, in battle, we see a little bit more of his powers being demonstrated here. Of course, he has this massive kind of cyclical kick that we saw last episode, but here we see something called Critical Dead, which basically looks like a pile of zombies clawing at the other riders to either kill them or take away their energy. That looks really creepy, and I like that too. But all of this goes back to Kuroto-dan's whole demeanor having been changed since he's let the rest of the world know, yes, I am the bad guy here. He's a lot more confident than he was before, and I like it. He's buying into it. He is that antagonist that we need to keep pushing this along. And of course, there's this whole thing about Kamen Rider Chronicle, the game that he seems to be developing. The game that he says that once it comes out, people will realize they don't need any other games. Now, admittedly, from my own experience of having worked as a game head corporation, or at least playing that character with designs for having the ultimate game, I get what his plan is and I applaud it. Good job. And then, of course, the end of the episode, we see the debut, at least in suit, of the Mighty Brothers Double X suit for Eggzade. Now, admittedly, for those people in Japan who are lucky enough to have seen the Heisei Generations movie, that suit already debuted there. This is our official in-show debut. Now, I appreciate how Paulette is playing the wild card here, since he blatantly gives Emu the gasha that's designed for his costume, which we'll of course see in a couple of episodes, but the idea that he's actually playing both sides, that he doesn't really care what Kuroto-dan thinks of things, but he really wants to see how Emu is going to rise to the occasion. I like how that's going to work out, but I'm more interested in how this is actually going to work out next episode when we actually see Mighty Brothers in action. The interesting thing about it is that with this form, Emu is split into two characters, two Eggzades, an orange Eggzade and an aqua blue Eggzade that will somehow work together to defeat Genmu. But of course we'll get more information on that next week, but this is still a lot to take in. For as many things as this episode had to cover, I am actually very glad that they're tackling the concept of death here now in a place where kids can understand it, and they might actually be better able to deal with it themselves. Maybe they have family members or people that they know and love that are going through something like that, and this will really help teach them. I really think it's a bold choice that Toei decided to let the writing go in this direction for this episode. The fact that Kiria's death isn't just a one-off, we've gotten over it and let's keep going. No, there are ramifications. Emu's still dealing with it. It's going to shape how he looks at death in terms of his occupation as a doctor. It's going to shape everybody for the rest of this show. And not only that, there's also the real-world ramifications of this character who also has pancreatic cancer and decides that he wants to give up on life. It's going to be interesting to see how they play with that next week, if he's going to get some of that drive back and decide to go ahead and get treatment and fight on, or if he's going to just let that go aside. For something that's meant as entertainment, I appreciate it when they take the time to invest in the storytelling and actually reach out to something that viewers actually might be dealing with. So for that sake, I am very happy that this show is doing as well as it is this far in. But you guys tell me what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Who do you guys think Nico really is? Do you think Genmu's a little too overpowered with not being able to take damage as a zombie? And did you want more Popey People Popo in this episode? Because I was fine with what we got. And of course, you can always talk to me over on Twitter during the week. I'm at Josh Knight First. This has been Ex8 Replay for episode 13 of the series, A Predetermined Destiny. I'm Josh Knight First. I'll see you guys again next time.